Have you ever wondered, if a wealthy man were to hand four women four limitless credit cards, what might happen? For one, it would be a stage, an invitation to flaunt, to sparkle, to bask beneath the glare of camera flashes. But for another, an ordinary girl with flour-dusted hands and a heart that had never learned the art of lying, it would become a key that could open a different kind of world, one where simple kindness lit up the shadows. And that in itself was enough to alter the course of a life forever. Autumn in Vermont always carried its own signature scent, part damp maple leaves, part apple pie fresh from the oven, so potent that memories and the present moment could be mistaken for each other. Inside a grand wooden chalet nestled among the trees, thunder grumbled faintly in the distance, a quiet warning that tonight would be long. Reed Matthews, millionaire entrepreneur owner of the Matthews Resorts hotel chain, stepped into the living room looking like a man who had just lost a war no one else had witnessed. He tossed his cashmere coat over an armchair and sank into the sofa as though life itself had flung him out of the driver's seat. "I can't do this anymore, Noah." His personal assistant, Noah Ellis, who had stood loyally at Reed's side for 8 years, looked up from his ginger tea. His face betrayed no surprise, only the quiet recognition of a man watching someone stagger home from yet another storm. "It was just dinner, Reed. Just dinner." Reed shot upright, his eyes blazing with the fury of someone defeated. "She ordered dessert, took a selfie with it, called me her favorite ex, and then toasted to our potential reconciliation with sparkling wine. Tell me, Noah, am I a flesh and blood man or just a stock rising on the market ripe for investment?" Noah merely shrugged long, since accustomed to Reed's string of failed romances. Each one another paper cut to an already scarred heart. "No one sees me anymore, Noah. All they see is the bank account." Reed buried his head in his hands, raking through his hair as though answers might spill out between his fingers. "Maybe you need a break, or at the very least, a little fresh air," Noah offered, his voice as calm as a breeze on a stormy night. Reed didn't answer right away. Then, like a lightning bolt striking the dark, he lifted his head, eyes alight. Not with anger this time, but with the spark of an idea. No, I know exactly what to do." Noah blinked. "That's usually the point where I start to worry. An experiment. I'll run an experiment." Reed's smile tilted with dangerous amusement. "Every time you use that word, someone ends up crying, or I end up drafting a public apology." Noah rubbed his temples. "This time is different. I'll give 4 women in my life 4 limitless credit cards. No rules, no instructions, complete freedom, and I'll watch quietly." "Wait," Noah leaned against the kitchen counter. "Is this some kind of reality show?" "No." Reed's chuckle was soft, almost conspiratorial. "I just want to see who people become when power is placed gently in their hands without pressure. And Noah," his voice dropped to a whisper as though revealing a secret, "the 4th woman is her. Elle, the maid." Noah's jaw fell open. "The girl who threatened to beat you with a wooden spoon after you burned banana bread. That's the one." Reed smiled as though the thought of her was the only bright spot in his day. "Ella's the only person who's never asked me for a thing. She calls me Mr. Matthews, like it's the dullest word in her vocabulary, and whistles Broadway tunes while she scrubs the floor. I want to know, if I hand her power, will the world collapse? Or soften?" Noah studied him with wary eyes. "I don't know what you're searching for, Reed, but this will either destroy everything or save you. And honestly, I wouldn't dare place a bet on which." By morning, the chalet was wrapped in a strange silence. The kind that meant Reed was orchestrating something no one could contain. On the oak dining table lay 4 glossy black envelopes, lined up like chess pieces, each inscribed in the curling silver ink. The first was for Savannah, his second assistant after Noah, as punctual and precise as a Swiss clock. When she strode into the office, heels ticking like metronomes, Reed handed her the envelope. "Are you dying?" Savannah asked, narrowing her eyes. "Not yet, but this is 3 days of absolute freedom. No limits." Reed replied. Her smile was sharp as a razor blade. The second went to Isla, a part-time model with an aura as misty as a London morning. She accepted the envelope with suspicion. "What game is this, Reed?" "Just a gift. 3 days. Do whatever you like." Her lips curved faintly, eyes glittering with calculation. Next came Veronica, his ex entering as though she'd been cast in a romantic comedy. "Oh, Reed, you never fail to surprise me." "Just a little present," Reed said. 3 days. All yours. And last, Elle. She emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of raw cookies apron askew. "Boss, the new oven's groaning like an old man with back pain." Reed's voice softened. "I have something for you." Ella eyed the envelope as if it were a boarding pass to Mars. "You're firing me, aren't you?" "No, it's a gift. 3 days. Spend whatever you like. No limit." She peeked inside, saw the black card, and nearly dropped her tray. "You must be ill. I literally burned banana bread yesterday. Just take it. And spend it on what? Anything you want, truly." Ella held the card like a ticking bomb. "Anything." "Yes. Well, fine then." She shrugged, though her gaze still lingered on it with suspicion. Reed left before she could argue herself out of it. That afternoon, he sat in his office sipping bourbon in the glow of sunset. Noah entered, tablet in hand. "The transactions are coming in." Reed's eyes lit up with intrigue. "Any surprises?" Noah scanned the screen. 3 helicopters, a $15,000 dress, a 5-star hotel booking. Predictable. And Elle's card. "Yes." Noah read slowly. "Local grocery store, rice poster paint, baby diapers, secondhand toys, and 200 sausages." Reed set down his glass. Sausages. 200. Leaning back, Reed's lips curved into a slow, dawning smile. "Now that I really want to see." The next morning, Vermont's sky wore its softest shade of blue, but inside the Matthews estate, no one felt the calm, least of all, Reed. He sat at the long dining table, a cup of coffee long gone cold before him, silver spoon circling round and round like a clock hand refusing to stop. By the window, Noah flicked through documents while half listening to the rhythm of notifications from his tablet. Ping! Another alert. Noah Reed's voice drifted out of the coffee's steam, though his eyes never lifted. "Ella's card just lit up again," Noah replied, pushing his glasses higher. "A truck rental for the day. Note says, community event." Reed blinked. "Event?" "There's more 200 balloons, 30 pounds of sugar, paints, brushes, colored paper, and..." Noah paused for effect. "A clown costume." Reed almost choked. "A clown? Is she opening a circus?" "Not sure." Noah's lips twitched. "Looks more like she's planning something big. Maybe for the kids." Reed set his cup down, gaze clouding over. "We need to know exactly." "You mean spy on her?" Noah teased. "Not spy, systematic observation." "Of course. Very scientific." By 2 that afternoon, Reed was behind the wheel of a black SUV, the least conspicuous in his collection of gleaming cars, rolling down quiet country lanes. From the truck rental company's records, he traced his way to a modest neighborhood where pastel-painted houses stood framed by lovingly kept gardens. From a distance, he spotted the sign, St. Teresa's Center, Shelter and Community Support. The rented truck sat outside its back doors, flung wide. And there was Elle. Her blonde hair was swept into a high, neat bun. She wore a faded Choose Kindness t-shirt and worn jeans carrying crates with a strength that seemed to come as much from her spirit as from her arms. Her voice, bright and alive, rang out in conversation with those beside her, glowing as though sunlight had found its human form. Reed's heart lurched, perhaps because he had never seen Elle quite like this. Not glamorous, not polished, but radiant in a way that couldn't be faked. Honest, human, alive. Without thinking, he opened the door and crossed the street. At reception, an older woman with a halo of silver hair greeted him with a kind smile. "Hello there. I'm Helen, the center's director. How can I help?" "I'm Reed Matthews." He began shifting under the weight of his own awkwardness. "I heard someone's organizing something special here today, and I'd like to contribute in some small way." "Oh, you must mean Elle." Helen's laughter sparkled. "She's been lighting this place up all week. Come in, come in." Through the simple hallway, Reed stepped into another world. A world where children's drawings plastered the walls and laughter filled the air like a soundtrack to life itself. And at the heart of it stood Elle. Only now she was dressed head to toe in a clown costume, green and yellow stripes, oversized red shoes, and a bright round nose. "And now you twist the balloon like this?" "Oh, oops!" Pop! The balloon burst in her hands, flying away like tiny fireworks. "Looks like this one wanted to be confetti instead." Elle declared, pulling the children into a storm of giggles. One little boy laughed so hard he toppled over. Leaning against the doorway, Reed watched spellbound. Ella wasn't merely entertaining the children. She became one of them. She sang silly songs, pulled faces, and danced like the world had forgotten to watch. When a small girl slipped and scraped her knee, Elle immediately knelt beside her. "What's this princess?" she asked, slipping off her red nose. Her voice soft and steady with care. "I fell." The girl sniffled, pointing at the cut. "Ah, this calls for a magic bandage." Ella pulled a colorful plaster from her pocket and smoothed it gently over the wound. "Now you've got super healing powers." "Really? Really? But only if you jump 3 times. The girl bounced 1, 2, 3, then flung her arms around Elle in a fit of bright laughter. Reed felt something twist inside his chest. Not pain. Something startlingly alive. "Mr. Matthews," a gentle voice behind him. He turned to see a young volunteer, smiling. "I'm Lacey. Helen said you'd like to help." "Yes, what can I do?" "Ella needs someone on hot dog duty. Think you can manage that?" Ella was handing out bread rolls when her eyes caught on him. Among balloons, sugar, and chaos, he stood out. Crisp shirt-polished shoes, looking as if he'd stepped out of another life entirely. She sighed inwardly, half amused, half unsurprised. Of course. The man never fits in. And yet somehow, he always shows up. 10 minutes later, the millionaire hotelier, accustomed to candlelit dinners and vintage wine, was standing stiffly beside a portable grill, holding tongs as though they were alien instruments. "Are you sure you can manage this?" Reed L. called, eyes glinting. "I have an MBA from Harvard," he replied with faux confidence. "One sausage shouldn't defeat me." She winked. "Fair warning, I have a PhD in burning things. Together, we'll be perfect." 5 minutes later, Harvard's theory went up in smoke, literally. Reed dropped sausages, splattered ketchup across his shirt, and nearly set the bread tray alight. "Mr. Matthews," Elle folded her arms, feigning sternness. "Ever considered a career in demolition?" He shot her a look, though his lips betrayed a smile. "Very funny. Take the tongs. I'll play server." And so they switched. Ella manned the grill, while Reed, perhaps for the first time, became the waiter at a children's fair. To his surprise, he liked it. Each sausage he handed over earned him not only a smile, but also a gift, a crayon drawing a silly story, a question that disarmed him. "Are you really rich?" asked an 8-year-old, squinting. "I suppose. Yes." Reed hesitated, unsure if that counted as an appropriate answer for small children. "Then can you buy a dragon?" "Dragons don't exist," Reed said, trying to sound solemn. "Yes, they do," the boy protested, eyes shining. "Elle said she's seen one." Reed turned. Ella was calmly flipping sausages, pretending she hadn't heard her mouth curling into a secret smile. He laughed under his breath. Perhaps she really had seen a dragon. And in that moment, Reed realized something else. He was looking at one himself. Not a beast to slay, but a wonder to chase. The next morning, a pale mist blanketed Vermont, like a quilt of white draped across rooftops and forests in the little town. But inside Reed Matthews' penthouse, there was nothing dreamy about the day. Reed sat at the dining table, coffee steaming in his hand, though his eyes never left the glowing tablet before him. The screen sang a relentless tune of numbers: 3 yachts, a dress costing as much as a car, a Saturday gala planned with the theme contemporary elegance. He sighed and shook his head. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had predicted, beautiful, extravagant, and utterly hollow. Noah entered with another freshly printed sheet. "Morning updates?" "Anything from L. Reed?" asked his voice, dropping into the rim of his coffee. Noah nodded, eyes tinged with surprise. "She's rented a large tent, ordered bulk suites, 30 folding chairs, and a face painter for the children." Reed looked up. Face painting. She added a note, "For the little superheroes." And she's had a sign printed Love Day fair, free for all children and families. It seems she's planning a real community event. Reed fell silent. In his mind rose the image of Ella, a balloon bursting in her hand, powder streaked across her face, her eyes glowing with joy. Joy that asked for nothing, bargained for nothing, and yet gave everything. Noah lowered himself into a chair opposite. "So, what are you going to do?" Reed smiled faintly, a fragile rope, keeping him tethered to something he wasn't ready to name. "I'm going for coffee." Ella was in the kitchen swiping her forearm across her forehead, humming a country tune so off-key that even the radio gave up and went quiet. The hiss of boiling water mingled with the sweet smell of waffles in the air. Reed slipped in as quietly as a breeze. "I'm here on a rescue mission, to save a lovely girl from a kitchen-plotting mutiny. Coffee with me." Ellie spun around, startled, wielding a giant wooden spoon like a wartime weapon. "Midlife crisis. Yesterday, you pop up at the shelter today. You're asking me out for coffee. Did you bang your head somewhere?" Reed smiled. "No, I just think I may have fallen into your kindness." Ella studied him, then shrugged. "You're good at talking nonsense. Fine. As long as you don't mind the sauce-stained shirt and the hair that looks like it survived a crow attack." He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "You look perfect, truly." 20 minutes later, they were seated in a small cafe tucked between the narrow streets of the old quarter. No boardrooms, no power suits, only the scent of fresh bread, the soft jingle of the doorbell, and cups of steaming coffee. Ella peered into hers as though it were a precious stone about to speak. "So, this is rich people coffee." Reed chuckled. "No, this is ordinary coffee, the same kind Mrs. Martha sells at her bakery on the corner. I picked this place on purpose, because it feels like you." "You mean cheap coffee, wobbly chairs, and flickering lights?" "I mean warm, unpretentious, and the kind of place you want to stay." A flush rose in her cheeks. "You do know how to make people uncomfortable, don't you?" "No, I just say the truth, something I think I've forgotten how to do." She stirred sugar slowly, her usual banter replaced by a quietness that felt fragile. There was something in Reed's eyes that stopped her from turning everything into a joke. "Reed," she began cautiously, "why are you doing this? The credit cards, the experiment." He exhaled, shoulders heavy. "Because I wanted to know, who's genuine? Who still sees me as a man, not just a 9-figure account balance? And have you found your answer yet?" He looked at her. In his eyes was an answer, though unspoken. "I think I'm beginning to..." She turned away quickly, hiding a smile she didn't know how to carry. She wasn't used to eyes like his. She wasn't used to being the center without trying. "You know," she said softly, "the shelter I took you to. I once lived there." Reed froze. "You lived?" "From when I was a child until I turned 18, she cut in quickly as though speed might lighten the weight. "My mother left me with a note, 'My love, I hope you'll have a better life.' And that was it. I grew up there until I could work, and eventually ended up at your estate." Reed said nothing. Silence was all he had, but it was filled with respect. Ella's eyes drifted to the window, where branches swayed lightly. "People think orphans only need money, food, clothes. Yes, we need those things. But what we crave most is for someone to see us as real people. Not with pity, not with fear, not with avoidance. Just with their heart." Her gaze returned to him. "The way I saw you from the first day. When you burned banana bread and blamed the oven." Reed laughed. "And you threatened to hit me with a wooden spoon." "That spoon's still there," she said with a grin, "hanging on the rack." They lingered there in the hum of clinking cups and the scent of vanilla curling through the air. Words became unnecessary. Feelings slipped into the silence between them. "Thank you," Reed said quietly, "for the coffee. For reminding me there are things money can't buy, and those things are the most valuable of all." Elle looked at him, her eyes like a lake after rain, clear, still reflective. "Then you'd better remember that, no matter what happens next." Reed didn't know why she said it that way, but he knew from that moment on, the thing he wanted to hold on to wasn't the experiment. It was her. That afternoon, Reed returned to the mansion in silence. The last rays of sunlight stretched through the glass panes, draping everything in a golden veil. Gentle, deceptive, the kind that almost convinces you all is well. But Reed's heart knew otherwise. It weighed heavy, dragging with it, questions that refused to be answered. He pushed open the door to his study, where Noah sat at the desk, Bluetooth earpiece dangling, his eyes locked tensely on the screen. The room was tidy calm, but there was something in the air that told Reed instantly trouble. "Bad news?" Reed asked, voice low. "No preamble?" Noah removed the earpiece, looked up slowly, and nodded. "The other three, they know?" Reed stiffened. "Know what?" "About Ella's charity event, and about you being there." Reed closed his eyes, forehead tightening. "Who told them?" Noah rotated the screen toward him. Who else but social media? On it, Savannah's Instagram story, a blurred glass of champagne captioned philanthropy, is a lifestyle. Preparing for a gala night of elegance and compassion, followed by glittering heart emojis and the hashtag charity gala. Reed frowned. She doesn't even know what the gala is. Noah clicked across to another tab. Veronica posted a selfie in her new gown, ready to shine for a noble cause. And Isla, he pressed play on a live stream, is wine tasting calling it prep for her community soiree. Reed sank into the sofa rubbing his temples. He wasn't angry, but something inside him cracked. A quiet disappointment born from the cruel irony of being proven right when all he wanted was to be wrong. So, they've scented opportunity, Reed said at last, and are racing to brand themselves with it like a marketing campaign for their own image. Noah nodded. Meanwhile, Ella hasn't said a word. No posts, no photos, no hashtags. She just keeps working. Reed lifted his gaze to the screen, to the faces of three women who had once epitomized his world. Now they looked no more than elegant hollow silhouettes. You see it clearly now, don't you? Noah asked gently but knowingly. Reed didn't answer straight away. Yet his eyes told the truth. Something in him had shifted. Not anger, not regret. A recognition sharp as sunlight burning through fog. At last, he knew who was genuine. He rose, turning toward the desk. Cancel every meeting tied to the so-called gala those three are planning. Noah inclined his head. Understood. And Noah. Reed paused at the door. Yes, don't let anyone use Elle's kindness as a billboard again. Not this time. Not ever. 3 days trickled by like a spring stream. Quiet, yet full of undercurrents. Reed spent much of it cloistered in his office eyes, following credit card statements, social media feeds, and the scrawled thank you notes he'd brought back from Elle's fair. Children's handwriting messy and bright. Thank you, kind clown. I wish every day had sausages. Miss Elle is a superhero. On Tuesday evening, Reed made his decision. He summoned all 4 women to the mansion. Noah stood beside him in the living room, loyal as a soldier at the edge of battle. Confirmed Veronica's arriving by helicopter. Isla's on time, assistant in tow. Savannah is live streaming her journey here, captioning it, "Get ready for Mr. Matthews' big reveal." And Ella. Noah's lips quirked. She texted, "If this meeting involves money, I'm bringing sandwiches. These talks always make me hungry." Reed laughed. For the first time all week, the sound came without strain. By 2 o'clock, the living room looked like the set of a reality TV finale. Armchairs, perfectly aligned sunlight, pouring through glass at just the right angle to look staged. Veronica sat by the window, arms folded her hair, catching the light like a halo, strategically placed. Isla crossed her legs, eyes glued to her tablet as if she were mid-boardroom presentation. Savannah nodded politely to the others, though her gaze never strayed far from the camera she'd set to stream. Elle arrived last, still tugging off her rubber gloves, hair scraped into a hasty knot, a smudge of cookie dough dusting her cheek. "Sorry," she said, pulling at the gloves. The oven staged another protest. "Smells like someone's baking tires instead of biscuits." No one laughed. They weren't accustomed to unpolished honesty. Reed stood stepping into the room like a narrator about to unveil the twist. "Thank you all for coming. 3 days ago, I handed each of you a limitless credit card as a gift." Veronica smiled. "And a life-changing experience." "Exactly," Savannah chimed in. "I've explored new ways to invest strategically in myself. And Isla added, have been expanding my network of entrepreneurs for the greater good. Very inspiring." Reed said nothing. Instead, he turned to Elle. "And you, Elle?" She shrugged. "I bought sausages balloons, some paint. For the kids." Savannah blinked. "No spa, no shopping spree. No, I've got coconut oil at home, and this t-shirt hasn't sprouted a new hole yet." Veronica's lips tightened. "Aren't you worried people will think you wasted an opportunity?" "What opportunity?" Ella asked, genuinely curious. "The opportunity to impress." Savannah cut in. "To show him," she nodded toward Reed, "that you can use financial power with vision." Ella frowned, her voice quiet but firm enough to hush the room. "I'm not great at strategy, but if someone gave me a gift that big, I'd want to turn it into joy. For people who never get gifts. Simple as that." The room held its breath. Isla chuckled lightly, sipping water as though listening to a fairy tale. Sweet, but short-sighted. Ella smiled, not the apologetic kind, not defensive. The smile of someone who knows exactly where she stands. Maybe, but that day the kids laughed like the whole world belonged to them. And if I have to choose between a strategy and a moment that makes someone feel they're worthy of love, I'll take the second, every time. Reed's throat tightened. After years of glossy speeches at luxury conferences, here was the first voice that made him want to stand and applaud over a single sentence. Veronica leaned forward, her tone silk, her eyes sharp as hidden blades. So you did it all for the children, or because you knew it would catch Reed's attention? Ella turned to her calmly, no anger in her face. She looked as though she'd heard that kind of question before too many times to flinch. If I really wanted to impress Reed, she said, then let a small smile flicker. I probably should have learned to bake properly by now, but the truth is, I still burn bread. And he's seen it more often than anyone. Reed laughed aloud, unable to contain it this time. And in that instant, he knew. He had finally seen what he'd been searching for all along. True kindness, unstaged, unframed, a light that shines on its own. The air in the living room was strung tight like a violin string pulled too far. One more vibration and it might snap. But Ella, apron slung over one shoulder, hands still carrying the faint scent of flour, was the only one untouched by it. She simply stood there, feet tucked in, as though she had no intention of competing. And truly, she didn't. Reed inhaled deeply and turned to the others. I didn't call you here to listen to polished speeches or hear excuses dressed up as philanthropy. Veronica arched a brow, fingers brushing the hem of her gown. Then why did you call us here? Reed's gaze swept across them, steady, unwavering. To have a real conversation. No stage, no hashtags, just the truth. Savannah laughed softly like a breeze, but it was cold. The truth. The truth is we used the gift you gave us. Financial power. To invest in ourselves, image networks, opportunities. Yes, that's the truth. And it's also how this world works. Does that world include anyone who laughs wholeheartedly just for holding a balloon? Elle's voice slipped out gently, unplanned. Isla exhaled a scoff. You really think balloons can change a child's life? No, Elle said slowly, but they can turn a bad day into one worth remembering. The words struck Reed like a small bell tapping glass inside his chest. Not loud, but true. Veronica straightened her smile, sharp. The only thing is, Elle, your little projects may look noble on the surface, but who can say what your motives are? You helped a shelter? Yes. But you also caught Reed's attention. I don't need anyone's attention. Ella replied, her voice lower than usual, carrying a quiet weariness that seemed to have lived in her for years. I only want those who are easily forgotten, to have someone who remembers them. Reed stood. Something inside him was rising. Not anger, but a fierce resolve, like a man stepping out of cold water and deciding to sprint uphill even if he stumbles. Enough, he said, his voice calm, yet undeniable. I started this experiment with one purpose, to see who could look at the world with a true heart. Veronica laughed, her voice as cold as morning frost. So, you finally found your humble little heroine. Reed turned to Ellie, no hesitation left in his eyes. No, I've found what I thought the world had lost. Someone who doesn't need credentials, connections, or a spotlight. Just quiet kindness. And through her, I've begun to see the world differently. Softer. Truer. More human. Elle parted her lips to respond, but Reed stepped closer, his voice gentling into a whisper. 3 days, Elle? That's all it took for you to show me that in 30 years I've mastered only one thing, overlooking what truly matters. Elle laughed, small and warm like ink spreading through water. Are you talking about burnt sausages and charred banana bread? Exactly. Reed nodded. Their eyes met. Not the gaze of people promising forever or painting love in pastel shades, but the gaze of two souls who had been bruised, broken, and were now learning to listen. To the messiness of mornings, the meals gone wrong, the silences that said more than words. Isla rose every inch the model, leaving a catwalk, lips pressed into a line. I think this meeting no longer concerns me. Savannah snapped her tablet shut, standing in her shadow. You have your answer, Reed. I hope it doesn't become your regret." Veronica was the last to leave. She paused, her eyes flickering from Reed to Elle. For a fleeting second, her usual coolness softened into something almost like regret. But it vanished as quickly as it came, and then she was gone behind the oak door. The room suddenly felt larger, quieter, and, strangely, truer. Ella exhaled, shaking her head. "I never thought I'd be the one to make 3 women as flawless as statues walk out all at once." Reed burst into laughter, real and unrestrained. "You're the only person I know who could do that, wearing an apron with flowers still on your face." Ella touched her cheek, grimacing. "Oh God, is it still there?" "Yes, but it's cute," Reed said, half teasing, half sincere. "You've clearly never seen me angry." "I hope I never do." They both laughed, then the sound bubbling up into the vaulted ceiling, and for the first time, the grand mansion felt lighter, like they had finally found the thing both of them needed relief. Moments later, Noah entered carrying 2 cups of hot tea. Ella curled into the armchair, legs tucked up as though she were at home. Reed leaned against the window frame, watching the sunset stain the maple trees red. "Want the news?" Noah asked, setting the cups down. "What news?" Reed asked without turning. "Ella here has just been mentioned in the local papers, Faces of Kindness this week. A parent from the shelter wrote it. With a photo attached." Ella's eyes widened. "No, please don't tell me. It's the clown picture. The very one." Elle buried her head in her hands. "I'll be banned from every school in Vermont." Reed turned, his eyes lighting up, as though he'd just found a painting more precious than any on his walls. "You know what, Elle," he said slowly, "that's the first time I've seen someone make a credit card meaningful." Ella blinked, then laughed. "I thought I only made it sticky with mustard and ketchup." Reed tilted his head, his voice softening. "That too, but meaningful, in a very Elle way." And then they said no more. They didn't need to, because sometimes what makes us love someone isn't grand declarations or perfect plans. It's the small moments, awkward, unpolished, unremarkable, yet so warm they silence the world. No one said it out loud, but that meeting left a strange hush lingering in the Matthews mansion. Ella still cooked, still rose, early still hummed each morning, but Reed noticed something. She no longer sang along to country tunes. Instead, she whistled softly, as if sketching the laughter of children inside her head. And Reed felt more unfamiliar to himself than ever. He who once commanded a hotel empire, who understood every ROI calculation and market expansion strategy, now found himself undone by the gentle gaze of a girl in an apron who never quite mastered her oven. On Sunday afternoon, as sunlight spilled lazily across the back lawn, Elle appeared on the porch carrying a basket of freshly baked cookies. For once, no smoke alarm blared. No burnt scent clung to the air. No smoke means they're edible, right? Reed looked up from the book he hadn't been able to read a single line of. No smoke means at the very least the oven hasn't filed for divorce from me this time. Elle shrugged, setting the basket on the wooden table. They sat there in a yard so peaceful it felt cut out from the rest of the world, watching the sunset paint rooftops gold, listening to birds call each other home, breathing in the slow melt of butter drifting on the breeze. "People can think what they like," Ella said after a long silence. "About how I use the card, about how I don't dress fancy enough or talk smooth enough. But the kids at the center, they remember the smell of balloons, the face painting, my terrible music choices. And I remember them too, the look in their eyes when they realized someone believed they deserved joy." Reed said nothing. He only watched her, quietly, deeply. Ella wasn't giving a speech. She wasn't fishing for praise. She was simply speaking as if one person listened with their whole heart, it would be enough. After a while, she turned to him, her eyes shimmering with something that hadn't yet found its name. "Do you ever wish you could grow up all over again?" she asked softly, as if the question had floated straight out of her heart. Reed smiled, light but tinged with sorrow. "Yes, almost every day. But lately, I only wish that back then someone had sat beside me the way you're sitting now. Then everything might have been different." Their eyes held. No soundtrack, no fireworks, just a silence so still that the heart could hear itself. And then Reed leaned in. He kissed her. Not hurried, not demanding, just touching something both of them had carried inside for far too long. Ella didn't pull away, didn't startle. She simply closed her eyes as though this moment had lived in her imagination for years, waiting only for today to become real. They didn't speak afterward. They didn't need to, because some things, a single quiet kiss is enough. Monday morning, the Matthews mansion carried a strange kind of energy, as if even the air was pretending to be ordinary, knowing it couldn't keep the act much longer before something larger, louder, or unhideable broke through. Ella stood in the kitchen, stirring eggs as usual, but today there was no off-key humming, no country tune tripping over itself. She was silent, focused, and just a little shaky. Across the way, Reed had passed the kitchen doorway 3 times in 10 minutes. Each time he stopped briefly by the kettle, lingered, and then moved on again, as though he'd forgotten what he was doing the moment he arrived. Neither of them mentioned the kiss from Sunday. That kiss, light as breath, deep as the sea, sudden as summer rain. No urgency, no promises trailing behind, but it hovered there still, clear, warm, suspended between them, like sunlight you couldn't touch but could always feel. Ella glanced at Reed for the 4th time. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, staring at the floor as though counting the wooden grains. She exhaled softly and finally dropped a pebble into the still pond of silence. If you walk past one more time without saying anything, I'll start charging you kitchen rent. Reed startled, then looked up, and then he smiled, half relief, half embarrassment. I was just checking the room temperature. So is it hot in here? Not as hot as what happened in the backyard yesterday. Elle flushed but didn't look away. About that, I think I should apologize. Don't. Reed stepped into the kitchen, his eyes no longer drifting. I don't regret it. If you do, then maybe we can regret it together. Over coffee, perhaps. Ella laughed, shaking her head as she scraped the last of the eggs onto a plate. You're asking me on a date with sauce on your sleeve and my hair looking like a bird's nest. You're standing in my kitchen apron on flour still on your cheek, and you're the only person who makes my heart settle. So, yes, I'm asking. And that was all. No flowers, no rings, no rehearsed speech. Just truth, between the scent of eggs and the faint scorch of toast between 2 people slowly learning how to trust again. They chose a tiny cafe on the edge of town, the kind Elle described as where no one wears ties and the cheesecake is always gone too soon. Reed wasn't wearing a tie, naturally. As for the cheesecake, he ordered 2 slices the moment they sat down with solemn logic. I'm only ensuring the survival of this date. You know, Elle said, tilting her head as she cut into hers, I never imagined myself dating my boss, especially not the one who once called a raw salad minimalist haute cuisine. Reed chuckled, resting his chin in his hand as he watched her. I've never met anyone who makes me feel small and enormous at the same time. He paused, then spoke slowly. You remind me of the better version of myself. Sounds dangerous, Ella teased, one eyebrow raised. Dangerous as thinking money could fix every relationship. He brushed his fingertip across the back of her hand. And you, with 200 sausages and a clown suit, made me rethink my entire world. Ella froze slightly. Not because of the sweetness of the words, but because she wasn't used to being at the center of such an honest gaze, especially not from someone carved out of glossy magazines and gold trophies. Reed. Her voice was tentative, as if testing her own ground. I don't know. What will happen if we really start something? Are you scared? Yes. Because I'm your boss. Because you. The man in a penthouse on magazine covers winning golden awards. Elle smiled faintly, though her eyes carried a shade of worry. And I'm the woman with a broom in her hand whose biggest creative triumph is a sausage fair. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned in, his smile softer than she'd ever seen it. Elle, do you think the people in my world, with galas gowns and helicopters, know how to comfort a crying child with superhero-themed plasters? Elle bit her lip, fighting a smile. No. Then tell me, Reed tilted his head voice like a conclusion, who's really the creative genius? This time Ella laughed fully, without guard, without shame. And in her eyes was something new, something Reed had searched for all his life, a flicker of trust being born. That evening when they returned to the mansion, nothing special happened. No candles, no music. Just Reed scowling at the new coffee machine, as though it were an alien operating system, while Ella wrestled with her first ever attempt at caramel pudding, which turned out closer to corn porridge than dessert. She placed the small bowl in front of him, with a spoon and an apologetic smile. You don't have to eat it. I surrender to caramel. Reed lifted the spoon with all the gravity of signing $1 billion deal. We've survived burnt sausages and blackened banana bread. I'm trained for this. He took a spoonful, grimaced, swallowed. Ella's eyes widened. Didn't think you'd actually do it. Reed set the spoon down and looked straight at her. Because I love you. The kitchen fell silent as though every sound bowed to those words. Elle froze. Her eyes wide, her heart hammering so wildly it wanted to leap from her chest just to confirm it was true. What did you just say? Reed stepped closer, his gaze steady. Repeat performances are free. I love you. I love the flower on your cheek. I love the way you speak to children like they're miracles. I love that you choose what's right, even when no one sees. Elle bit her lip, her voice breaking though her mischief survived. Are you sure because I still can't bake without burning something? Reed smiled, leaning in. I like burnt bread. Elle laughed, a sound tangled between joy and relief, as tears spilled softly down her cheeks unnoticed at first. Then, you must love me a lot. A lot, Reed whispered, and this time the kiss wasn't a surprise. It was an answer to every unsaid fear, to every unspoken hope. A love born not of grand gestures, not of magic tricks, but of kindness, quiet, unassuming, strong enough to change a life. Outside, golden leaves danced across the open window, and in the little kitchen, once filled with the scent of burnt things, love bloomed, silently, steadily, and for real. The days that followed felt as though someone had quietly adjusted the speed of time. No more hurried footsteps, no more calls tumbling over one another, no more meetings that smelled of espresso and exhaustion. Instead, there were mornings filled with sunlight dancing across the kitchen table, the clink of spoons at imperfect breakfasts and laughter half hidden behind the flour smudges of waffles that hadn't yet been washed away. Reed Matthews, the man who once crossed continents just to sign a hotel contract, now spent most of his hours leaning in doorways listening to Elle tell stories. About the children at the shelter, about porridge spilled on the floor, about the stray cat that had made a home in the backyard of the center. They've called him George L., said stirring a pot of soup. But little Sarah insists on calling him Princess George because, according to her, cats should be allowed to change their identity whenever they want. Reed laughed, propping himself against the frame like a man who'd stumbled into a fairy tale. That girl should write a book. I told her that. Ella smiled. She said, when I'm as tall as Mr. Matthews, I'll write one. Then she winked. The kind of wink that means, I know who you are. Reed said nothing, but inside something softened. Gratitude simple and deep for being let into this small world, not as a magnate or a name in bold print, but as a man learning how to listen again. And then Thursday morning arrived. Ellie was folding laundry when the doorbell rang. No warning, no slot on Noah's carefully managed schedule. When she opened the door, there stood a man in a sharp suit, briefcase in hand, his smile polished like it had been rehearsed in the mirror. Good morning. I'm David Richardson, board member of the Matthews Foundation. I'm here to personally thank you. Ella frowned slightly. Thank me? For what? For your moving speech at the charity event, David said smoothly. We've had wonderful feedback. And personally, after reading the transcript, sent in by a volunteer, along with photos from the fair, I believe you're a rare source of inspiration. Elle blinked. She'd never posted anything, never written anything down. But then she remembered. A parent had once asked to jot down her words after being touched by them. Perhaps they had sent it in. Instinctively, she drew the door a little closer to herself. I don't think I fit labels like inspiration. I'm just the woman in a clown suit handing out hot dogs. David's smile didn't waver. You're far too modest. I only wanted to express admiration. And if you don't mind, I'd love to invite you to lunch, to talk about possible collaboration on community projects. Elle opened her mouth to answer, but footsteps approached from behind. Reed. His expression calm, but his eyes carried a quiet sharpness. What's this about? He asked. Mr. Richardson wants to take me to lunch. Elle set her tone carefully neutral. Reed stepped forward, shaking David's hand. Thank you for the offer, but Elle isn't a spokesperson or public representative. David inclined his head, still perfectly polite. I understand. But sometimes the ones who don't try to impress leave the deepest impression, and we need more of her kind. Elle needs time, Reed replied, his voice firm, unyielding. David nodded. Of course. Here's my card. Whenever she feels ready, she only has to call. When the door shut, Reed turned to Elle. His eyes searched hers as though looking for something unsaid. Ella stood still, her fingers brushing the edge of the tablecloth, like it was anchoring her. You're uncomfortable, aren't you? she asked. Reed nodded slowly, then shook his head. Both. Elle moved toward the table, her voice quieter than usual. I wasn't going to accept, but you don't have to look at me as though someone just stole your favorite box of cookies. Reed tilted his head, half smiling. Not the box of cookies, the one who bakes them. Elle laughed short and light, but enough to ease the air. Do you keep those lines ready in your head all the time? Only when I'm speaking to someone special. This time she met his eyes and didn't step back. Reed, I don't know what we are. I don't have a plan. I'm terrible at relationships. I've grown used to people promising then leaving. I've grown used to people changing their minds. Reed's gaze deepened. And I grew up in a world where people always stayed. For something. For money. For fame. For power. Maybe that's why. I stopped knowing who stayed just for me. Silence followed. Not heavy, but like a pause in music that simply needed to breathe. Elle reached out her hand, brushing his. Then, maybe we start with baking together. Reed nodded, though in his heart he knew. They'd begun long ago. With a balloon shared, with laughter in a clown suit, with a look that said nothing but hid nothing either. And now they were only learning how to hold on to it in the simplest language of all. Standing side by side in the kitchen, flour on their hands, truth in their hearts. That Saturday, when sunlight poured like honey over the fading autumn leaves, Ellie stepped out the door with her hair tied neatly, 2 bulging bags of craft supplies and colored paper tugging at her arms. Reed stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his gaze trailing after her as though a thread ran from his chest to each step she took. "You're sure you don't want me to come along?" he asked, half teasing, half earnest. Ellie turned, narrowing her eyes. "If you come, the kids won't pay attention. They'll just ask questions like, 'How rich are you?' Or, 'Can you buy a transformer?'" Reed grinned, "And if I said yes, then they'd love you forever and forget the paper cake I just taught them to make." "Sounds like a fair trade." Ella shook her head, stepping closer, standing 1 step below him on the porch. "There's a job for you here already." Reed raised an eyebrow. "The coffee machine again." "No, the oven. Yesterday it made this thud-thud noise like it was auditioning for a rock concert. I think it's jealous of the new toaster at the center." He laughed, bent down, and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Be careful on the road." "I always am." And then she left, light as a falling leaf, yet impossible not to turn back and watch. Not long after Ellie was gone, Reed walked into his study to find Noah waiting, his face carrying a seriousness that rarely belonged to him. "What's wrong?" Reed asked, setting his tea on the desk. Noah handed him a file. "You need to see this." Reed opened it. Inside were screenshots, printed emails with messy yellow highlights, and then a headline from an online paper, bold and heavy, "Inspiration or Illusion." The woman behind the Matthews Gala, accused of fabricating her past. And beneath it a sting of words. Some sources claim LAR exaggerated her personal history to gain sympathy, using the charity event as a platform to boost her image. What's the truth? Reed's chest dropped like a stone. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, almost growled. Someone anonymously leaked it to several outlets, along with an old employment record from when Ella worked at a city cafe. They've twisted it into suggesting she was dismissed for inappropriate behavior. Reed shot to his feet, his voice sharp as glass. "That's garbage," she told me. "She stood up for a younger waitress after the manager insulted her. They used it as an excuse to sack her." "I know, but with the press..." Noah exhaled, laying the file flat. "Truth isn't always the currency they're trading." Reed sank back into the chair, hands locked together, eyes fixed on the grain of the table, as if the wood might spell out an answer. "Who's behind this?" Silence. Then Noah dropped the name short and blunt, like a stone in still water. "Savannah." Reed closed his eyes, not in surprise, in disappointment. "She thinks this is clever. She knows public opinion is merciless," Noah said low. "And no fame to shield her, no PR army behind her, is the easiest target. Plant one seed of doubt and social media will do the rest." Reed slammed both palms against the desk, his voice level, but his eyes cutting sharp as a blade through fog. "We won't stay quiet." "You mean you'll speak out?" "Not with a press release, not with polished spin, with truth, in front of everyone." Noah frowned. "Where the media will want perfect lighting, curated backdrops, a stage." Reed turned to him, his eyes stripped of hesitation, left only with resolve. "At the community center, where Elle began this, with kindness, not campaigns. 3 days later, cameras, journalists, and microphones crowded the humble grounds of St. Teresa's Community Center. No one could quite understand why Reed Matthews, the man who never appeared anywhere without a luxury logo stitched nearby, had chosen a place with cracked walls, wobbly wooden chairs, and no air of grandeur. In the small kitchen, Elle's hands trembled as she smoothed the collar of her shirt. Her hair was tied neatly, though one strand fell stubbornly across her forehead, refusing all order. Reed entered. She looked up at him, her eyes brimming with questions. "Are you sure? Surer than you, not burning toast," he said. "Reed, I mean it. So do I." He stepped closer, took her hand. "We don't need to convince anyone. We just need to show them the truth. You're the truest thing I've ever known." Elle bit her lip, tears already trembling at the corners of her eyes. When Reed stepped up to the small wooden platform in the center's courtyard, he wore no suit, no tie, no assistant whispering notes behind him, just a hand-painted sign at his back, the marker bleeding a little under the sun. A place where children are trusted and loved. He stood there, no paper in hand, his voice steady and deep, loud enough to reach hearts, not just ears. "Thank you all for coming." He paused, letting the quiet breathe. "I'm not here to deny or defend. I'm here to tell a story." He looked out. The breeze tugged at his shirt, lifting the hair of children gathered cross-legged below. A story about a woman without a glossy feed, without a glamorous wardrobe, without a dazzling resume, but with a heart wide enough to hold a shelter of children. With sandwiches, with painted faces, with small things we've long forgotten how to call miracles. At the back, Ellie stood beside Sarah, the girl who insisted cats could change names and genders. Sarah squeezed her hand and whispered, "You're glowing. You know that, right?" Reed went on, his eyes sweeping the crowd, his voice now gently tilting toward Elle. "If anyone wants to believe the articles, I won't stop them. But if you've ever seen a child laugh because of a butterfly painted on their cheek, or believe a superhero plaster could heal a wound, then you'll understand why I choose to believe Elle." He stopped, not because he lost his words, but because the moment was too full to rush past. Then he turned. His eyes found hers in the crowd. And when their gaze met, no microphone was needed. Love has its own volume. And I don't just believe in her. I'm proud. Proud because Ellie is the woman I love. A ripple stirred through the audience. Cameras flashed. Voices murmured. But Elle heard none of it. She only heard her heart beating once. Clear, undeniable. Then again, a song quietly rising in her chest. A song named Trusted, Loved. And for the first time in her life, Ella knew not everyone leaves. Some people stay through storms, through rumors, through burnt bread. And they stay not because she's flawless, but because they've seen something beautiful in her most imperfect parts. On Sunday morning, Vermont lay under a veil of mist as though the sky itself was exhaling after days of storm. But inside the warm kitchen of the Matthews estate, life was stitching itself back together again. The clink of a spoon against porcelain, the murmur of running water, and Elle's off-key whistling, still tuneless, still crooked, yet sounding like a quiet declaration that trust once mended could keep singing. Reed walked in, hair damp from his morning run. He paused when he saw her at the counter, back turned, wrapped in the oversized butter-yellow jumper he once teased was a winter cocoon for gentle souls. On the table sat a tray of biscuits expanding into peculiar misshapen forms, but perfuming the air like something worth forgiving. "Don't ask what I put in them," Ella warned before he could open his mouth. "I'm still not sure whether flour or brown sugar won the battle." Reed laughed, pouring himself a glass of water. "Whatever it is, it's still easier to swallow than a media scandal." Ella turned, bracing her hands on the table. Her hair was mussed from the oven's heat, her cheeks flushed, and she looked like something startlingly simple and profoundly worth holding on to. "You know what's funny?" she asked. I always thought if my name ever made it into the papers, it would be because I blew up a microwave in a block of flats. Never imagined it'd be under controversial humanitarian." Reed stepped closer, brushing her shoulder with his. "That's because you dared to be kind without asking permission. Sounds dangerous." "Very," he nodded, "especially in a world that prefers lipstick on lies to calling truth by its name." Elle met his eyes. No dodging now. Her voice dropped soft. "I'm not used to someone standing up for me." Reed didn't smile. He tilted his head gentle. Then start getting used to it. She exhaled, a laugh slipping out, but her gaze stayed steady, weighted with meaning. I'm also not used to believing someone won't change their mind. Reed didn't answer right away. He only reached up, brushing the unruly strand of hair that had fallen across her cheek. I'm not perfect, Elle. I've doubted, hesitated, collected a whole list of half-decisions. But if there's one thing I am absolutely certain of, it's this: you don't have to prove a thing to be trusted. Her throat tightened. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She'd already cried enough, on childhood nights when people walked away without a word. Now it was time to believe that someone might stay. Not because she was flawless, but because they saw beauty in her unfinished edges. A week later, they returned together to St. Teresa's. No journalists, no cameras, just the children. Shoes scuffed, cheeks pink from running, eyes shining as they spotted Elle at the door. Miss Elle. The chorus rose like waves against the heart. A little boy ran to wrap himself around her legs, whispering, "I saw you on TV. You're famous now." Ella crouched down, holding him close. "Only famous because I forgot to zip up my coat that day." "Not true," another girl cut in. "You're famous because of the handsome man standing next to you. That's what my mom said." Reed froze mid-step, startled. Ella arched a brow. Handsome man. Who could that be? That one? The man who dropped the sausages in Camp Bake. The children erupted in laughter. Reed raised his hands in surrender. "All right, guilty. But I'm good at fixing ovens and apologizing properly." "Is that enough points to be a dad?" A little girl piped up, innocent as daylight throwing a stone into still water. The air stilled for a beat. Then Elle burst into laughter. "Oh, Emmy, that line belongs at the end of a movie. But real life is better than movies," the girl huffed. Reed glanced at Ellie. She was still laughing, but in her eyes shimmered something so tender, it felt like standing at the edge of something sacred. That night, when the children were tucked into sleep and the center glowed with the soft velvet of golden lamps, Reed and Elle sat on the porch, mugs of hot cocoa steaming in their hands. Above them, Vermont's night sky was stitched with thousands of stars. Not dazzling, but enough to remind them that beauty often comes quietly. "Have you ever imagined," Reed asked, eyes still fixed on the fragile bands of light overhead, "what kind of person you'd love one day?" Ella was silent a moment. Then she said softly, "Someone who listens, even when I haven't spoken yet." Reed turned to her. "And me," he didn't pause, "someone who makes me forget I was ever afraid to trust." A delicate silence lingered between their mugs, between the chill in the air and the whisper of leaves beyond the porch. Elle set her cup down, shifting to face him. "Reed, yes, one day I might hurt you. Not on purpose, but maybe I'll say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, or stay quiet when I should speak. I'm not good at loving people the way they expect." Reed laid his hand gently over hers. "And I'm not used to loving someone who wants nothing from me but kindness." Ella smiled a smile both sad and warm. "Then, where do we start?" Reed squeezed her hand, softly but enough to carry the weight of an answer. "Start with not leaving when it gets complicated." Elle nodded. She didn't say more, but her eyes softened as though she'd just set down a heavy suitcase she'd carried for years. And then, as if the world agreed, a few maple leaves drifted down, brushing their shoulders like the final notes of a gentle symphony. That night, beneath the dim light from the kitchen, there was no proposal. No ring, no flowers. Just two people, once broken, once doubtful, once misunderstood, sitting side by side, learning how to breathe in the same rhythm. Because sometimes love isn't in the grand promises. It's in the quiet act of holding someone's hand one day at a time, through the little things no one records, without a script, and still choosing to stay. 6 months later, one spring arrived in Vermont without noise, without rush. It slipped in like a whisper, through each blade of grass, each moss-covered brick wall, each breath of the Matthews estate. The house was no longer what it once had been, not because of its furniture, but because of its laughter and the smell of flour. So much flour. "Tommy, don't pour the whole packet of salt into the dough," L.A. cried from the kitchen, brandishing her trusty wooden spoon, like the scepter it had always been, while Reed stood beside her, trying not to laugh. At their feet, 4 children squabbled over Easter egg paints, their faces smeared like little warriors after a battle of watercolors. "What are you laughing at?" Elle scowled, a stray strand of hair falling into her eyes. "Just thinking," Reed replied, brushing flour from her cheek with his thumb. That our kitchen now looks like a theme park overrun by flour chocolate and magic. You forgot chaos and high blood pressure. But yes, that too. The children burst into laughter as though life itself had pressed play on their soundtrack. Since Ella had officially turned the kitchen into a second home for the children at the center, the Matthews estate had become a stage for amateur baking lessons, storytelling circles, and quiet evenings when a child needed somewhere safe to cry. And Reed was no longer a millionaire haunted by control. He was a man who knew how to plunge his hands into soapy water after baking sessions, who knew how to replace the batteries in a bear-shaped nightlight, and, most importantly, who knew how to listen without rushing to fill the silence. That evening after everyone had left, Reed found Elle in the back garden, where paper lanterns were strung across the vine-covered trellis, now budding with new life. She was sitting alone on the swing leg, swaying lazily, holding a folded drawing, one of the children's. "Strange, isn't it?" she said as he sat beside her. "I used to think my life would be small. Work-home quiet days, like a sticky note on the fridge. Useful, but no one really noticing." Reed stayed quiet. He knew listening was what she needed. But then, someone handed me a credit card. No rules, no limits, just freedom. "And you spent it on sausages," he teased gently. "And balloons," she corrected. "Don't forget the clown suit. Never. It's still hanging in the wardrobe. Sometimes I look at it to remind myself, there was a day I laughed loudly without caring what anyone thought." Reed smiled faintly, then stood. "I have something for you." Elle raised her brow. "If it's another credit card, I might faint." "No, this time it's handwritten." From his pocket, he pulled a folded sheet creased and stained faintly with coffee. Ella took it, opened it. Inside his handwriting was careful, unpolished, and disarmingly simple. "If I'm allowed to love someone in my own way, then I choose to love you with the smallest things, washing the dishes when you're tired, remembering the kind of tea you like, and building a kitchen big enough for you, me, and every child you want to shelter. If you agree, let's write the rest of the days still unnamed." At the bottom, instead of "Will you marry me?" it read, "Do you want to open a bakery with me and raise too many children together?" Elle laughed, tears falling before she could catch them. She looked at him, startled and unsurprised all at once, because this was Reed, in the most Reed way possible. Is it even legal to propose without a ring? From his other pocket he pulled out a wooden spoon, a tiny one, with a ring attached. "I thought about it," he said, deadly serious. "Diamonds wouldn't suit you. This won't snag when you're baking." Ella threw her arms around him, pressing her face into his shoulder, surrounded by the scent of night blossoms and the gentle glow of lantern light. "I'll say yes, but you'll have to actually learn how to bake. Challenge accepted. And take babysitting shifts when I'm busy. I'll be captain of the mop, and you're never allowed to doubt me, not even if tomorrow the papers say I'm an international spy." "You're the oven spy, I already know." They both dissolved into laughter. The swing swayed gently, and the night folded around them, needing no fireworks, no trumpets, only a little burnt bread, a handful of clumsy dreams, and a love brave enough to stay. A year later, the bakery L & Co. opened on a small street near the community center. Its sign carried the same handwritten promise. Here the bread is homemade and hugs are free. Inside, Reed wrestled with a wedding cake that leaned like the vanilla version of the Tower of Pisa. Elle emerged from the kitchen sleeves, rolled high face, dusted with flour, laughing until she bent double. "You do realize I'll have to rescue every wedding order from now on, right? That's the only way to keep this marriage balanced." The children burst in, school bags bouncing, coloring books spilling, and Sarah now, the proud honorary receptionist, wearing a paper crown. Life spilled into every corner, messy, noisy, utterly alive. And there, between the scent of butter and the sound of laughter, lived a love that had begun with an unlimited credit card, but was kept alive by things that could never be bought. The following summer, Vermont bloomed with the fragrance of lavender cicadas humming like a background song no one needed to compose. L & Co. had become the town's familiar meeting place. Not for perfect cookies, they rarely were, but for the kind of atmosphere that made anyone who walked through the door feel as though they had come home. Reed was often spotted playing the role of apprentice waiter, clumsy, sometimes spilling coffee, but always rewarded with indulgent smiles from the regulars. Ella kept humming off-key tunes as she wiped the tables, and no one complained. In fact, people said it had become the town's signal of a peaceful day. The children from the center still flocked in after school. They colored directly onto the wooden tables, leaving behind bright stains of marker pen that Elle stubbornly refused to scrub away. These ink marks, she explained, are proof of happiness. Reed agreed, because he had learned that sometimes the smudges, the mess, were the very strokes that made the picture whole. One afternoon after the shop had closed, Reed and Elle sat together on the porch hand in hand, watching the sunset drape the town in shades of rose. No noise, no cameras. Just a quiet moment, like a secret whispered only to them. "Do you see it?" Elle murmured. "We turned a credit card into an entire new life." Reed smiled, lowering his lips to her flour-dusted hand. "And I've never seen a transaction more worthwhile." And so, between the scent of sugar and the hush of twilight, their story did not close with a full stop, but with a gentle comma, opening into countless more sweet tomorrows.